What is common between Hyundai, Toyota, Ford, Volkswagen, and BMW? Names that are known to all of you, and of course you'll tell me they are automobile companies. But there's something more in common to all of them. They are family-owned businesses. Hi, I'm Jay, and I'm going to talk to you about what it takes to succeed in business, particularly how do you nurture value in family business. I've realized that almost everyone wants to join a foreign multinational company. But the truth is, globally it has been seen that family businesses have actually offered more to an economy. But let's take a quick look at what is meant by a family business. Essentially, cutting out all the major definitions, in a sense, it's a business which is perhaps running into multiple generations, where a group or a family is taking all the real business calls. And if you look at it from this definition, it's not really about who owns the majority stake, because in some businesses, particularly large global businesses, sometimes you find that families have a shorter shareholding, less than 50%, but they seem to control the destiny of the firm. And in my books, that also qualifies it as a family business. So let's try and understand what it takes to run a business very well. And let me offer you my thoughts around that. So at the simplest level, a family business refers to an organization where a body or a group is actually controlling the destiny of the firm. It's got nothing to do with the number of shares that they own or the percentage of holding. It's really about whether there is a group of people who are, in a sense, taking the key decisions for the organization. And of course, whether over a period of time, it moves from one generation to the next. Because to me, when you look at the way a business runs, the intent of most businesses is to make it very large. And I use the analogy of the butterfly about how a business actually grows through various stages. And as all of us perhaps have studied in our basic school, there are essentially 4 stages in the life of a butterfly. And when you look at the way businesses have been created, and you can map various businesses, and you'll find that businesses are in one of these 4 stages. When the founder or the entrepreneur initiates the business, he puts a lot of money. And like a caterpillar that consumes a lot of food, initially businesses consume a lot of capital. But the hope is that if the business stays alive, one day it will become a large business. In the case of the caterpillar, or in the case of the butterfly, it's in the DNA of the butterfly that if it is alive, it will one day become a beautiful bird, or a beautiful butterfly, to be more precise. But that change, which is natural in real life, cannot be the same as far as business organizations are concerned. In business, to change and become a large global business or a large national business, it is not something that happens by accident. It has to be by design. So unless the founders or the people running the business have a certain vision of the future, the business does not automatically go through that entire cycle. And more important, when I'm talking about family business, and when you remember, I mentioned that it's about businesses changing generations. That is extremely important, that the business moves in multiple circles or multiple cycles. Therefore, to my mind, family business is actually a game played over multiple rounds. And therefore, if the business is not growing, in other words, it's stagnating, it has already begun to die. And why does that happen? Unfortunately, many businessmen, including founders, strong founders, forget that they have to be very careful. And I want to highlight 7 blind spots which impact family businesses. And I want to elaborate a little bit about those blind spots. Let's take the first one. Number 1, I said because of the nature of the way the business has been created, a lot of emotions come into play. And many families often forget that even if it's a family business, they are not immune from certain principles of good business organizations. To run a rational organization, you need to be alive to the fact that while relationships and emotions do come into play, you need to be ultimately grounded to the logic of the business. If a business gets too immersed into their own family issues, then the family's emotions are placed ahead of the logic of the business, and the business will suffer. There are examples galore of why families have not been able to take it further than one generation, which is why often you have this conventional wisdom that family businesses end within 3 generations. The first generation grows it, the second generation makes it stronger, and the third generation, of course, demolishes everything that has been created. There are too many examples of that. And that is because they forget that business has its own logic, and issues of the family should not become a barrier towards the growth of the business. Let's go to the second spot, or the second blind spot. And this is what I call poor role clarification. When there are many people from the family who want to, in a sense, drive the business, it's like having many hands on the steering wheel and perhaps a few guys trying to press the brake. And guess what happens? In such a situation, soon enough, the vehicle will go off the road. And that is primarily because I said if the business does not run by its own logic and roles are clarified as to who takes what calls, and unless that is ascertained very clearly and that is respected, business is bound to get into trouble. Wherever large families have split, it's because perhaps from one generation to the next, there are too many siblings, or perhaps in cousins who come into the story, or other members of the family who are trying to pull the strings from behind the scene. And then the employees inside the firm are confused as to who's really running the show, who takes the final call. And you cannot have a situation like that where too many people are allowed to take hard decisions. I said earlier that there has to be a strong vision that drives the organization. And that vision has to be articulated, and a community has to be created that swears by that vision, that is bound by that vision, in which case people must be ready to play their own defined roles. Let's move to the third one. The third blind spot which unfortunately hinder a business's growth. And that is because willy-nilly conflicts will arise. Now, conflicts per se are not wrong. In fact, in all businesses, all kind of businesses, conflicts happen. They happen at home. So they happen at the business as well. How do you nurture relationships in such a way that one should not ignore family conflicts that are building up? In many so-called professionally run firms, people are aware that when conflicts arise, they have to be sorted out. Unfortunately, in family businesses, many conflicts are pushed aside to be handled later. But then if you try and thrust it under the carpet, sooner or later, it is bound to come up and cause some serious concerns. So, ignoring family conflicts is actually a recipe for great disaster. And which is why I must insist that that when conflicts come up, you need to create channels for resolving those conflicts. And as a business grows, the fourth blind spot comes up. Because from the family, if you want to build a business, you are going to bring in more people. And today, family businesses are hiring lots of professionals. But if you don't transition to the professionals in the right manner, and this is important for me to stress again, that look, businesses can be family owned, but they need not be family run. There comes a time in the life of a family business when the business takes a shape of being family owned, but professionally run, professionally managed. In which case, the transition to those professionals has to be done judiciously, which means the first step is that you must prepare family members for this transition. If the family members are not prepared to transition to a new form of business, and they insist on still, like I said, holding on to the steering of the business, steering of the car, then the business is bound to get into trouble. So, cultural sensitivity is not just for the professional who comes in. That is another aspect to be remembered, that the professionals who are hired for businesses understand that this is a different kind of organization from the organizations they have perhaps worked in the past. Making culturally sensitive or culturally fit organizations, bringing those culturally fit members into the organization is important. But I think it should be preceded by getting the family members to understand that with the induction of professionals, their own members, all of them, the family members have to take on new roles. Or the expectation of the business from their side has also got to change. So if this transition is not appropriate, you will very soon see professionals exit, and then unfortunately family members go back to square one saying that professionals are useless because they come and go. They don't seem to ask themselves whether they have done enough to ensure that the professionals that they've hired, perhaps at an expensive a price, have been made comfortable enough to deliver what they have been hired to do. The fifth blind spot that I want to talk about is how the business moves into the next generation's hands. Now, succession planning, and that's a chapter by itself, but succession planning is not something that you do when the founder gets old. In fact, I would always insist that what you need to do is start planning well in advance. In fact, the moment the family business becomes a little larger, it is incumbent on the people who are manning the family business to start thinking in terms of grooming successes. Now, there are multiple stages involved in grooming successes, but if they are not done well, that's a big blind spot. Because what happens invariably is founders have this strong feeling, let's call it the myth of immortality. They believe they're going to last 1 more year, or 5 more years, or 10 more years. And they always think the time has not yet come to hand over to somebody else. And invariably, they fail to prepare for succession, which unfortunately means they are sowing the seed of the family business disaster. So, inadequate or improper or poor succession planning is actually a big blind spot in family businesses. Let's take the sixth one. I'm coming to the last few points that I want to talk about. And to me, this is something very, very significant, particularly in current times. The new role that women are playing in business is something that has to be welcomed. And I think if you don't get ready to, in a sense, lift the veil, if you continue to ignore the competent female member of the family, who is more competent than the male scion of the family, who traditionally has taken over the mantle of the business, that business is asking for trouble, because what you have done is that you've ignored competent people to take charge for the next generation. So in this case, today more than ever, the blind spot of businesses, or family businesses, particularly in certain organizations or let's say in certain communities, is that they have failed to understand that women can play as good, if not a better role in managing businesses. Businesses that ignore this are inviting trouble because, as I mentioned, family conflicts. Today, more than ever, there are a lot of advisors around who may perhaps tell the other members of the family that, look, this business could have been run better by you, and invariably we end up with a lot of legal tangles, and there are too many such cases that have hit the headlines in the business press for me to mention. But fair enough, let me just remind people that ignoring the role of the female member of the family is inviting trouble for the family and for the business. Let's not do that. Moving on, the final blind spot that I want to highlight is a blind spot that I talk about, saying self-medication has its limits. Too often businesses have looked inward, and that often happens in family businesses because you believe that the best answers can be found from within. You believe that you can only trust members from within. Then you become blind to the fact that as your business grows, you need external help. Applying band-aids or finding solutions which have limited value while only seeking internal ideas is actually asking for trouble. Smart family businesses who move from one generation to the next generation not only seek external assistance and finding people who can become either coaches for themselves, for their family or their family members, or find trusted aides who can help expand their business. They also look at professionals outside. Now, this external assistance can come through multiple forms. There are of course, consultants available, there are academics available, various people are available. But not seeking assistance is asking for trouble. Now, a last thought. Is business forever? I want to remind people they don't have to get stuck with. When the business moves from one generation to the next generation, you have to ask this question. If you wish to exit, you must do that. But therefore, to do that, some hard calls may have to be made. Now, as I often like to remind people, making the right decision may be painful in the short term, but certainly if you don't take that call now, the wrong call that you made today is guaranteeing more pain in the long run. So don't fall victim to that. So if you wish to take your business to the next generation, ask yourself, will you generate value and preserve the value and even make the value grow by doing the right stuff now? Will it take a major crisis for you to wake up from your sleep? Or can you allow perhaps a brave member of the family to ask these hard questions? I'm saying brave because he or she may become the victim of a lot of attacks within the family. But as we have seen historically in many businesses that have gone to the next generation, some member of the family has to stand up and ask some hard questions. And when they do that, then the business value that has been generated can actually move to the next generation. Now, I've just given you a few instances, but there are plenty more that we could talk about, and I would love to engage with you on this subject at some other time. So thank you very much, and I look forward to continuing to have this dialogue with you. Thank you.